Four bodyguards in black suits stepped through the door of Riverside Diner at 9:15 on a Thursday morning. Behind them came two lawyers in pressed gray briefcases in hand, eyes scanning the room with the kind of precision that made conversations stop mid-sentence. The espresso machine hissed into silence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Even the morning regulars, the construction workers who came in for coffee so strong it could strip paint, the nurses finishing night shifts, the college kids cramming before exams went still. The woman in gray walked to the counter where Michelle stood, frozen order pad dangling from her fingers. Her voice carried across the diner, calm and professional, the kind of tone that suggested she'd done this before and knew exactly how much weight it carried. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Marcus Johnson. Does he work here?" Michelle's hand-lifted finger pointing toward the back corner without her seeming to realize she'd moved. The woman turned. So did the man beside her. So did all four bodyguards. Marcus felt every pair of eyes land on him like physical pressure pushing the air from his lungs. He stood behind the counter near the coffee station, rag in one hand, the other braced against the stainless steel surface. His heart kicked hard against his ribs. People like this, lawyers, bodyguards, the kind of money that wore itself like armor, didn't walk into places like Riverside Diner unless something had gone very, very wrong. The woman approached. Her heels clicked against the cracked linoleum. She stopped 3 feet away and studied his face with eyes that missed nothing. "Are you Marcus Johnson?" Marcus nodded. His throat had gone dry. "My name is Patricia Lewis. I'm an attorney representing the estate of Elizabeth Victoria Anderson." She paused, letting the name settle. "We need to speak with you. Is there somewhere private we can talk?" Marcus felt the floor tilt. Elizabeth. That was her name. He'd never known it before. And this woman was standing in front of him saying words like estate and attorney, and he didn't understand any of it except the cold certainty spreading through his chest that something terrible had happened. "What's going on?" The words came out rough. Patricia's expression shifted, something that might have been sympathy crossing her face. "Perhaps we should sit down." Marcus led them to the back corner, to the table where she used to sit. The coffee cup was still there, left from 3 weeks ago when he'd made it out of habit, even though the chair stayed empty. Cold now, untouched. The sight of it made his stomach clench. Patricia and the other lawyer, Robert, she'd called him, sat across from Marcus. The bodyguard stayed near the entrance, hands folded, watching. The whole diner watched. Gary had stopped wiping tables. Michelle stood at the register, forgetting to breathe. Even Mr. Patterson had come out from the kitchen, dish towel slung over his shoulder, face creased with concern. Patricia opened her briefcase, pulled out a folder. Her movements were careful, deliberate, the kind of precision that came before delivering news that would crack someone's world in half. "Mr. Johnson, I'm very sorry to inform you that Elizabeth Victoria Anderson passed away 4 nights ago." The words hit like cold water. Marcus had known somehow. Deep in the part of his brain that recognized patterns and prepared for loss, he'd known the moment she didn't come back. But hearing it spoken aloud made it real, made it final, made it a fact he couldn't unknow or undo or pretend might still turn out differently. "How?" His voice barely made it past his lips. "Heart failure. She'd been ill for some time. She knew it was coming." Marcus stared at the table, at the cold coffee cup, at the exact spot where her hands used to wrap around the ceramic, holding it like she was trying to absorb every bit of warmth it offered. He thought about the way she'd looked the last time he saw her, thin, fragile, like something that might break if the wind blew too hard. He thought about the trembling in her fingers, the way she'd cried sometimes for no reason he could see. The notebook she carried everywhere, writing in it with handwriting too neat for someone living on the streets. "Why are you here?" The question came out hollow. Patricia exchanged a glance with Robert. Then she looked back at Marcus, and something in her expression shifted, became almost gentle. "Because Ms. Anderson left very specific instructions. She wanted us to find you. She wanted us to deliver something to you personally." Marcus looked up. "What?" Robert opened his folder and pulled out an envelope. Thick, cream-colored paper, sealed with wax. He slid it across the table, but before Marcus could reach for it, Patricia spoke again. "Before you open that, there's something you need to know. Elizabeth Victoria Anderson was not who you thought she was. Marcus frowned. What do you mean? Patricia leaned forward slightly. Ms. Anderson was a very wealthy woman. She inherited a significant fortune from her family. At the time of her death, her estate was valued at approximately $1.1 billion. The number didn't register at first. Couldn't register. Marcus blinked, looked at Patricia like she'd just spoken a language he didn't understand. $1 billion. That wasn't possible. Elizabeth wore a jacket that looked like it came from a donation bin. Her shoes had holes. She paid for coffee with coins scraped together from who knew where. She was homeless. She didn't have anything. That's not possible, Marcus said. She had everything, Robert said quietly. She just chose not to show it. Patricia nodded. 2.5 years ago, Ms. Anderson experienced a series of personal tragedies. Her parents were killed in a plane crash. Her fiancé left her shortly after the funeral. We believe his primary interest had been her inheritance. She fell into a deep depression and withdrew from her life entirely. Robert picked up the thread. 16 months ago, she began living anonymously. She gave up her penthouse, her cars, her entire lifestyle. She moved into shelters. She lived on the streets. She wanted to understand who she was without the wealth and status. She wanted to see how people would treat her when she had nothing. Marcus felt something cold spread through his chest. He thought about the way people in the diner had looked at her, the way Gary had complained about her making customers uncomfortable, the way Michelle had called her that homeless lady with a tone that suggested she wasn't quite human, the way strangers on the street had stepped around her like she was furniture invisible, irrelevant, something to be avoided rather than acknowledged. She came to this cafe because it was ordinary, Patricia continued, because nobody knew who she was. And for months, almost nobody treated her like a person. Almost nobody except you. Marcus shook his head. I just made her coffee. You did more than that, Robert said. She wrote about you. In her journal, she documented everything. He pulled a worn notebook from his briefcase. Small edges, frayed pages yellowed. Marcus recognized it instantly, the one she'd always carried writing in it when she thought nobody was watching. May I read something? Robert didn't wait for an answer. He opened to a page marked with a ribbon and began. Day 127. Marcus cut the toast into small pieces again today. He didn't have to. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't hold the knife, but he didn't make me ask for help. He didn't make a show of it. He just sat down and did it himself like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like I mattered. After 4 months of being invisible, someone finally saw me. Robert turned pages, found another entry. Day 143. Marcus's son came to the cafe today. Beautiful boy, maybe 7 or 8. An artist like my mother was. He asked me why I looked sad. No adult has asked me that in 16 months. Children see truth that adults have learned to ignore. I told him I wasn't sad right now, and for the first time in 2 years, I meant it. Another page. Day 156. I'm going into the hospital tomorrow. The doctors say my heart is failing, genetic condition worsened by stress and malnutrition. I've known for months. I accepted it. I'm not afraid of dying. But I'm afraid Marcus will think I abandoned him. I hope he knows he saved me. Not from homelessness, not from poverty. He saved me from believing kindness was dead. He proved that people can still see each other, can still care even when there's nothing to gain from it. That's worth more than all the money I ever had. Robert closed the notebook. The diner had gone completely silent. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat, loud and unsteady. His eyes burned. His throat had closed around something too big to swallow. I didn't even know her real name, he managed. That was intentional, Patricia said. She wanted to be anonymous. She wanted to be judged on who she was, not what she had. And you... She paused. You treated her with dignity when she had nothing to offer in return. That's what she was looking for. That's what she found in you. Marcus looked down at the envelope on the table. His hand shook when he reached for it. The wax seal cracked under his thumb. Inside was a single sheet of paper handwriting he recognized from glimpses of her notebook. He unfolded it slowly like it might dissolve if he moved too fast. The letter read, Dear Marcus, If you're reading this, then I'm gone. I'm sorry I couldn't say goodbye in person. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth while I was still here. But I want you to know that you saved me. Not in the way people usually mean when they say that. You didn't fix me or rescue me or change my circumstances. You just treated me like I mattered. And that was everything. I spent 16 months trying to find out who I was without money, without status, without all the things that people said made me valuable. What I found was that most people didn't see me at all. I was invisible. I was inconvenient. I was something to be avoided. But you saw me. You made me coffee. You cut my toast. You asked how I was. You let your son talk to me like I was a person worth knowing. You did all of that without knowing who I was or what I had. You did it because it was the right thing to do, and that is rarer than you know. I'm leaving you this money because I want you to have the chance I had the chance to start over, to build something that matters, to chase the dreams you told me about. But more than that, I'm leaving it to you because I trust you. I trust that you will use it the way it was meant to be used, not to buy things or escape your life, but to make the world a little bit better, the way you made mine better. Thank you for seeing me, Marcus. Thank you for treating me like I was worth something. You will never know how much that meant. With gratitude and love, Elizabeth Marcus read it 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. His hands were still shaking. His eyes were wet. He wiped them quickly with the back of his hand, aware that the entire diner was watching, that Gary and Michelle and Mr. Patterson and every customer at every table had witnessed this entire conversation. Patricia reached into her briefcase again. This time she pulled out a check, slid it across the table next to the envelope. Marcus looked down. The number was written in neat black ink, impossible and absolute. $1,200,000. He stared at it. His brain couldn't process what his eyes were seeing. That number didn't belong in his life. It belonged in news stories about lottery winners and tech billionaires and people who lived in worlds so far removed from his own that they might as well be different species. "This is for you," Patricia said. "Ms. Anderson wanted you to have it. She left very specific instructions that it was to be delivered to you personally along with that letter." Marcus shook his head. "I can't take this." "You can," Robert said. "And you should. It was her wish." Marcus looked at the check again. He thought about Isaiah, about the medical bills that kept piling up every time his son's asthma flared, about the inhaler that cost $340 a month because insurance wouldn't cover it, about the apartment in Roxbury with the heat that only worked half the time and the landlord who kept threatening eviction if rent came in late one more time, about the dreams he'd given up: culinary school, his own restaurant, a life that wasn't measured in overtime shifts and overdue bills. He thought about all the things this money could fix, all the problems it could solve, all the security it could buy. But he also thought about Elizabeth, about the way she'd looked at him when she asked if he ever thought about what made a person valuable, about the way she'd smiled when Isaiah showed her his drawings, about the way she'd written in that notebook documenting 16 months of being treated like she didn't matter by almost everyone except him. He thought about what she would want him to do. Marcus picked up the check, folded it, put it in his pocket. Then he looked at Patricia. "I want to set up a foundation." The words came out steady, certain, like they'd been waiting inside him all along. Patricia studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled. It was small but genuine. "A foundation for what, Mr. Johnson?" "For people like Elizabeth, people who are invisible, homeless women, kids who need help, anyone who's falling through the cracks. I want to use this money to make sure people get seen, get treated like they matter." Robert leaned back in his chair, something like approval crossing his face. "That's a significant commitment." "I know." Marcus met his eyes. "But it's what she would have wanted. I know that much." Behind him he heard movement. Footsteps. Gary stood there, face pale, eyes red. "Marcus, He stopped, started again. "I'm sorry. For what I said. About her. I didn't know." Marcus turned in his seat. "You shouldn't have said it, even if she was just homeless, Gary. She was a person. That's all that should matter." Gary's face crumpled. He nodded once and walked away, shoulders hunched like he was carrying something heavy. Michelle approached next. Her eyes were wet mascara tracking down her cheeks. "You're really doing this? Giving it all away?" "Not all of it," Marcus said. "Some of it goes to Isaiah's medical fund. Some goes to finally getting us a decent place to live. But most of it, yeah. I'm setting up a foundation." Michelle pulled him into a hug. She was crying openly now, not trying to hide it. "You're a good man, Dee. She knew what she was doing when she picked you." Mr. Patterson came over after Michelle let go. The owner of Riverside Diner was in his 60s, white hair and weathered hands, and a face that had seen every kind of customer humanity could produce. He gripped Marcus's shoulder. "You need time off to handle this. You take it. Your job will be here when you're ready." Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. Patricia and Robert gathered their papers. Before they stood, Patricia pulled one more item from her briefcase, a small package wrapped in brown paper. "One more thing. Elizabeth wanted your son to have this." Marcus took the package. It was light rectangular. He unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a set of professional artist charcoal pencils, the expensive kind, the kind that came in wooden boxes with felt lining. The kind Marcus could never afford for Isaiah, even though his son went through cheap pencils like they were water. There was a note tucked inside written in Elizabeth's careful handwriting. "For Isaiah, keep drawing. Keep seeing the world beautifully. Love. Elizabeth." Something broke inside Marcus's chest. He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes, shoulders shaking. Patricia and Robert waited in silence, giving him space to fall apart. When he could breathe again, when he could look up without his vision blurring, Patricia was holding out a business card. "Call me when you're ready to discuss the foundation. We'll help you set it up properly. Make sure it does what you want it to do." Marcus took the card, nodded. The lawyers stood. The bodyguards moved to flank them. They walked toward the door, and every person in the diner watched them go. The bell chimed as they left. Then silence rushed in to fill the space they'd occupied. Marcus sat at the corner table. Elizabeth's table. The cold coffee cup was still there. He picked it up, turned it in his hands. It was just ceramic, just a cheap diner cup, the kind they ordered in bulk from restaurant supply stores. But she'd held it. She'd wrapped her fingers around it and tried to absorb its warmth, and found something in that simple gesture that mattered. He thought about the morning she'd come in for the first time. Mid-October, cold enough that breath turned visible. She'd walked through the door wearing that donation bin jacket, hair tangled, eyes downcast. She'd sat at this exact table and hadn't looked at anyone. Gary had muttered something under his breath about homeless people driving away business. Michelle had rolled her eyes and gone back to wiping the counter. Marcus had just brought her coffee. It wasn't a grand gesture, wasn't heroic. He'd done it because she was a customer and customers got coffee. But then he'd seen her hands shake when she tried to count out coins, seen the way she held herself like she expected to be told to leave, and something in him had decided that the $3 she was short didn't matter. After that, it became routine. She'd come in most mornings. He'd bring coffee and toast. She'd pay what she could. Sometimes it was enough. Most times it wasn't. He never said anything about it. Just took whatever she offered and walked away. He thought about the rainy morning when her hands had shaken so badly she couldn't cut her own toast. How he'd sat down across from her without asking, taken the knife, cut the bread into small pieces and buttered each one. How she'd looked up at him with eyes full of tears and whispered thank you in a voice that sounded like it came from someone who used to live a different life. He thought about Isaiah coming to the cafe that one morning when the babysitter canceled. How Elizabeth had approached his son carefully like she was afraid of scaring him. How she'd folded a paper crane from a napkin with hands that somehow stopped shaking when they had something beautiful to create. How Isaiah had looked at that crane like it was magic. He thought about the questions she'd asked. Strange questions now that he looked back on them. Questions about what made a person valuable, about whether he'd ever thought about starting over, about dreams and choices and the cost of kindness. She'd been testing him, testing everyone. 16 months of living invisible, documenting how humanity treated someone who had nothing. And he'd passed without even knowing there was a test to pass. Marcus set the coffee cup down, looked around the diner. Every face was turned toward him, waiting to see what he'd do next. He stood up, walked to the counter, pulled out the check and smoothed it flat next to the register where everyone could see. "Elizabeth Victoria Anderson," he said, voice carrying across the room. That was her name. She wasn't just some homeless lady, she was a person. She had parents who died. She had a fiancé who left her. She had money, more money than any of us will ever see. But she gave it all up to find out if kindness still existed. He looked at Gary, at Michelle, at Mr. Patterson and the construction workers and the nurses and the college kids. She sat in that corner for weeks, months probably, before I started working here, and almost nobody saw her. Almost nobody treated her like she mattered. I wasn't special. I wasn't better. I just made coffee and cut toast and didn't think about it too hard. His voice caught. He swallowed hard and kept going. She left me this money, more money than I know what to do with, and she trusted me to use it right. So I'm going to set up a foundation. The Elizabeth Victoria Anderson Foundation. For people who are invisible. For people sitting in corners, waiting for someone to see them. Silence held for 3 heartbeats. Then Michelle started clapping. Mr. Patterson joined her. Then Gary, then the construction workers, then everyone in the diner was applauding, and Marcus felt heat flood his face, felt his eyes burn again. He held up a hand. The clapping died down. "I need to go home. Need to tell Isaiah. Need to—" He stopped, shook his head. "I need to sit with this for a while." Mr. Patterson nodded. "Take all the time you need, son. We'll cover your shifts." Marcus untied his apron, hung it on the hook behind the counter, picked up the package of pencils meant for Isaiah. The letter, the check. He folded them all carefully and put them in his jacket pocket. Michelle caught his arm as he headed for the door. "You're really not keeping any of it." "I'm keeping enough for Isaiah's medical bills, enough to get us out of that apartment, maybe enough for him to go to a good school someday. But the rest—" He looked back at the corner table, at the empty chair. "The rest belongs to everyone she couldn't help herself, everyone still waiting to be seen." Michelle squeezed his arm and let go. Marcus walked out of Riverside Diner into cold November air. The sky was gray, threatening snow. His breath plumed in front of him. His hands were shaking again, had been shaking since the lawyers walked in, since Patricia said Elizabeth's name, since the world tilted and revealed that nothing had been what it seemed. He thought about going straight home, thought about walking through the door and sitting Isaiah down and trying to explain that the woman who taught him to fold paper cranes had been a billionaire testing humanity, and she'd left them enough money to change their lives. But his feet carried him a different direction, toward the church 3 blocks over, toward the cemetery behind it. He didn't know if Elizabeth was buried there, didn't know where wealthy people put their dead. But there was a bench near the old oak tree where he used to sit sometimes after Sarah died, when the grief was too loud to carry around other people. He sat there now, pulled out the letter and read it again. You will never know how much that meant, but he did know. He knew because he'd watched her face change over the weeks, watched her go from someone who flinched when people got too close to someone who could smile at a child's drawing, watched her go from someone who held herself like she expected to be hurt to someone who could ask questions about dreams and starting over. He'd seen her become visible again, piece by piece, morning by morning, 1 cup of coffee at a time. His phone buzzed, text from Mrs. Thompson, his neighbor, the woman who watched Isaiah sometimes when Marcus pulled double shifts. "Isaiah asking when you're coming home. Says he has something to show you." "Everything okay?" Marcus typed back. "On my way. Everything's different, but it's going to be okay." He stood, folded the letter 1 more time, put it back in his pocket next to the check that would change everything. The walk home took 15 minutes, long enough for his hands to stop shaking, long enough for his breathing to steady, long enough to start building the words he'd need to explain this to his 8-year-old son. Mrs. Thompson met him at the door of his apartment building. She was 72, gray hair pulled back in a bun, eyes sharp and kind. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that." Marcus managed to smile. "How's Isaiah?" "Drawing up a storm. Used up half the paper I brought over." She paused. "You sure you're all right, baby?" Marcus thought about the answer, about the lawyers and the letter and the foundation he was about to build, about Elizabeth sitting in that corner table for weeks, waiting to see if anyone would treat her like she mattered. "I'm going to be," he said. "Yeah, I think I'm going to be all right." Mrs. Thompson studied his face, then nodded and stepped aside. Marcus climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, unlocked the door. Isaiah looked up from where he sat at the kitchen table, pencils scattered around him, paper covered in drawings. "Dad, look what I made." Marcus crossed to the table, looked down at the drawing. 3 figures, a man, a boy, and a woman. The woman had long hair and a gentle face. She was teaching the boy something with her hands. "Who's that?" Marcus asked, even though he already knew. "The paper crane lady. I wanted to remember her." Marcus pulled out the chair and sat down. Put the package of professional pencils on the table. "She wanted you to remember her too, buddy. She left you these." Isaiah's eyes went wide. He touched the wooden box like it might disappear. "Really?" "Why?" Marcus took a breath, let it out slow. "Because her name was Elizabeth, and she wasn't just a paper crane lady. She was someone very special who wanted to make sure you kept drawing." "Where is she now?" The question was simple, direct, the way children asked things when they wanted truth instead of comfort. "She died, Isaiah, a few days ago." Isaiah's face crumpled. Tears welled up in his eyes but didn't fall yet. "Did it hurt?" "I don't think so, buddy. I think she was ready." "Like Mom." Marcus felt his chest tighten. Sarah had been ready too at the end, had held his hand and made him promise 3 things, and told him she loved him one more time before the cancer took the last of her strength. "Yeah, like Mom." Isaiah wiped his eyes, picked up one of the new pencils, tested it on the paper. The line it made was dark and smooth, nothing like the cheap pencils Marcus bought from the drugstore. "She was nice," Isaiah said quietly. "I'm glad I met her." "Me too, buddy. Me too." They sat together while Isaiah drew. Marcus watched his son's hands move across the paper, creating something new from the grief the way Sarah used to do, the way Elizabeth had recognized when she saw Isaiah that first morning. Later, after Isaiah was in bed, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with the letter spread in front of him. He read it one more time, committing every word to memory. Then he pulled out his phone and called the number on Patricia Lewis's business card. She answered on the 2nd ring. "Mr. Johnson, I was hoping you'd call." "I want to start tomorrow," Marcus said. "The foundation. I want to start building it tomorrow." "That's ambitious." "People are still out there, still sitting in corners, still invisible. Every day we wait is another day someone doesn't get seen." Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'll have papers ready by noon. Come to my office. We'll begin." Marcus thanked her and hung up. Looked around the small apartment, at the kitchen where he cooked meals on a hot plate because the stove only worked half the time, at the living room where Isaiah's drawings covered every available surface, at the closed door of Sarah's room, their room once before she got too sick to sleep anywhere but the hospital. This money would change all of that, would give them space and heat that worked and a stove that didn't require prayer to turn on, would give Isaiah the medical care he needed without Marcus having to choose between rent and inhalers. But it would also change everyone else who sat in corners, everyone else who went invisible, everyone else who waited to see if kindness still existed. Elizabeth had tested humanity and found it wanting in almost everyone. Almost. Marcus would make sure that almost started to shift. One foundation at a time, one person at a time, one cup of coffee at a time. He thought about her sitting at that corner table holding the cup with both hands trying to stay warm. He thought about her notebook and her questions and the way she'd smiled when Isaiah asked why she looked sad. "I'm not sad right now." She'd meant it. In that moment with a child who saw her as human, she'd meant it. Marcus picked up one of Isaiah's drawings. the one with 3 figures. He'd hang it somewhere in the foundation office when they had one, a reminder of what they were building and why. The pencil Elizabeth had given Isaiah sat next to the drawing. Marcus picked it up, turned it in his hands. It was just wood and graphite, just a tool for making marks on paper. But she'd chosen it, had thought about Isaiah even while dying, had made sure he'd have what he needed to keep creating beauty. That mattered, more than the money, more than the foundation. The fact that she'd seen a boy and thought about his future and made sure he'd be taken care of, that was the real gift. Marcus set the pencil down carefully. Tomorrow he'd start building something that would last longer than any of them. Tonight he'd sit with the weight of what he'd been given and what it meant and how he'd carry it forward. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall, small flakes drifting past the window, visible only in the streetlight's glow. By morning it would cover everything, the streets, the buildings, the city, making it all look clean and new and full of possibility. Marcus watched the snow and thought about second chances, about how Elizabeth had spent 16 months looking for proof that people could still be good, about how she'd found it in a diner where nobody special worked, where the coffee was cheap and the toast came pre-sliced. She'd found it in him, not because he was exceptional, but because he'd done the most basic thing, treated another human being with dignity. And now he had the chance to make sure other people, people sitting in corners, people going invisible, people waiting to be seen, had that same experience, had someone who treated them like they mattered. It wasn't much, but it was everything. Marcus stood, walked to Isaiah's room, opened the door quietly. His son was asleep, one hand curled under his cheek, the new pencils arranged carefully on the nightstand like treasure. "I'll make you proud," Marcus whispered. Didn't know if he was talking to Isaiah or Sarah or Elizabeth or all three. He closed the door, went back to the kitchen, sat down with the letter one more time. Thank you for seeing me. He'd keep seeing people, every day, for the rest of his life. That was the promise he made there in the small apartment with snow falling outside and his son sleeping and a dead woman's gratitude folded in his pocket. He'd keep seeing people, because it mattered, because it always mattered. 9 weeks earlier. The first leaves had started turning when she walked into Riverside Diner on a Tuesday morning. October 3rd, 5:47 in the morning, early enough that the construction workers hadn't arrived yet, late enough that the night shift nurses had already come and gone. Marcus was refilling the industrial coffee maker when the door chimed, cold air rushing in with her. She moved like someone trying not to be noticed. Head down, shoulders, curved inward steps, small and careful. The jacket she wore had been expensive once, good wool tailored cut, but time and weather had stripped it to something threadbare. Her hair hung loose around her face, unwashed, streaked with gray, that might have been premature or might have been earned. She didn't look at the counter, didn't look at Marcus, just made her way to the back corner booth, the one with the cracked vinyl seat and the view of the alley where the morning deliveries came through. Marcus finished with the coffee maker, grabbed a pot and a mug, walked over. She flinched when he approached, just slightly, like she'd forgotten people still moved in her peripheral vision. Her hands were clasped on the table, fingers laced together tight enough that the knuckles showed white. He set the mug down, poured coffee without asking. The steam rose between them, carrying the bitter smell of beans roasted too dark, brewed too strong. The kind of coffee that stripped the coating off your tongue but got you through a shift when your eyes wouldn't stay open. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "How much?" $2.50 for coffee. $4.50 if you want something to eat." She reached into her jacket pocket, pulled out a handful of coins, counted them on the table with fingers that trembled. $1.63. A Canadian quarter that wouldn't work in the register. 2 pennies so worn the faces had rubbed smooth. Marcus looked at the coins, looked at her. She was staring at the table like those coins represented a calculation she'd already failed. "Coffee's $2.50, he said. Scooped up the $1.63 and left the Canadian quarter and the worn pennies. "Close enough." Her head came up. Eyes met his for the first time, brown, red-rimmed, exhausted in a way that went deeper than missed sleep. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe? or suspicion, like kindness was a language she'd forgotten how to speak. "Thank you." The words came out with an accent underneath, not foreign, but polished, the kind of diction that suggested education, private school's elocution lessons that hadn't quite been buried under however many months of living rough. Marcus nodded and walked back to the counter. Michelle had come in through the back, tying her apron hair pulled into a ponytail that was already starting to escape. New customer. She glanced toward the back corner. "Yeah." Michelle lowered her voice. "She homeless?" "Don't know. Not our business either way." "Long as she pays?" Marcus didn't respond. He'd learned a long time ago that some conversations weren't worth having. Michelle meant well usually, but she'd grown up different than he had. Grew up with safety nets and college funds and parents who could cover emergencies. She didn't understand that sometimes being short 87 cents on coffee was the difference between eating that day or not. The woman in the corner sat nursing her coffee for an hour. Didn't order food. Didn't ask for a refill. Just held the mug between both palms and stared out the window at the alley where nothing interesting ever happened. She came back the next morning. Same time, same booth. Marcus brought coffee. This time she had $2 exact. He took it without comment. The pattern held for a week. Coffee only $2 an hour of sitting and staring while the diner filled and emptied around her. Gary started making comments on the third day. "She gonna order food or just take up space?" He was wiping down tables near the back cloth, moving in aggressive circles that suggested he'd rather be doing something else. "She's a paying customer." "Barely. $2 for an hour of real estate." "Then I'll buy her seat time." "Leave it alone, Gary." Gary muttered something under his breath but let it drop. He was good at that, knowing when Marcus had drawn a line and deciding whether crossing it was worth the hassle. Usually it wasn't. On the 8th day she ordered food. Toast, dry, nothing else. Marcus brought it out with butter on the side, jam, a knife. Set it down in front of her. She looked at the butter and jam like they were a test she hadn't studied for. "Didn't order these." "They come with toast. No extra charge." Another flicker across her face. That same surprise-suspicion combination, like generosity was something that came with conditions she couldn't see yet. She picked up the knife. Her hand shook. Not a tremor from age or illness, but something else. Something that made the metal rattle against the plate when she tried to spread butter. She set the knife down. Tried again. Failed again. Marcus was clearing a nearby table. He watched her struggle, watched her face tighten with frustration or shame or both, watched her finally give up and just tear a corner off the toast with her fingers, eating it dry. The next morning it rained. Not the gentle autumn rain that smelled like earth and decay, but the cold October kind that came sideways, driven by wind that found every gap in clothing, every crack in walls. She came in soaked, the jacket plastered to her frame, hair-dripping jeans dark with water from the knees down. Marcus brought coffee, then toast. This time, when she picked up the knife and her hands shook too badly to hold it steady, he didn't walk away. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. She froze, looked at him with something close to fear. "May I?" He gestured at the knife. She hesitated, then slid it across the table. Marcus buttered the toast, cut it into quarters, then into smaller pieces, bite-sized, easy to manage. He pushed the plate back toward her. "Thank you." This time the words came with wetness in her eyes. Not tears exactly, but close, the kind of emotion that lived right on the edge of breaking loose. "You're welcome." He stood up, walked back to the counter. Behind him he heard the small sound of her eating, careful and quiet, like she was afraid someone would notice and take it away. Michelle was watching from the register. "What was that about?" "Nothing." Her hands were shaking. "I helped." You can't save everyone." "Not trying to save anyone, just cutting toast." But that wasn't quite true. Couldn't be true because he'd made a choice in that moment, made it without thinking sure, but still made it. The choice to see someone struggling and do something about it instead of looking away. Sarah had taught him that. 3 years dead and still teaching him, voice in his head clear as if she were standing beside him. The world will try to make you hard, Marcus. Loss does that. Grief does that. But you have to resist. You have to stay soft enough to feel other people's pain, even when you're carrying your own. She'd said it 2 weeks before the cancer took her, when she could still speak without the oxygen mask, when her hand could still grip his hard enough to leave marks. She'd made him promise 3 things. The last one was the hardest. When you're ready, love again. Don't spend your whole life mourning me. I wouldn't want that. He'd promised. Meant it. Still wore his wedding ring 3 years later and couldn't imagine taking it off. The woman came back every morning for 2 weeks. Coffee and toast, always the same. Marcus always cut it for her, never made a production of it, just sat down for 30 seconds and took care of what needed taking care of. On day 16, she spoke more than 2 words. You have family. Marcus was wiping the table next to hers cloth, moving in slow circles. A son. Isaiah. He's 8. That's a good age. Something in her voice softened. Old enough to have real conversations, young enough to still believe in magic. You have kids? She shook her head, looked down at her coffee. No, almost did once. Long time ago now. The conversation died there. Marcus didn't push. People told you what they wanted you to know when they were ready. Pushing just made them close up tighter. But after that morning she started asking questions. Small ones at first. Was it busy today? How long had he worked here? Did he like it? Marcus answered simply. Honestly. Yes, mornings were busiest. 2 years at the diner. It paid the bills, which was all he needed it to do. What did you want to do before bills mattered? The question caught him off guard. He paused, mid-wipe cloth stilling against the laminate. Culinary school. Wanted to open my own restaurant someday. Why didn't you? Life. Wife got pregnant senior year of high school. I dropped out, got work, planned to go back, but he shrugged. Time got away from me. Then she got sick. Then she died. Now I've got Isaiah and 2 jobs, and culinary school feels like something that happened to someone else. The woman watched him with eyes that saw too much. Do you regret it? Marcus thought about the question. About Isaiah sleeping in the next room every night, breathing steady and even alive and healthy, despite the asthma that tried to kill him twice a year. About Sarah's last smile, the way she'd held his hand and told him she was proud of the life they'd built together, even if it wasn't the life they'd planned. No, I don't regret the choices I made. Just wish I'd had more choices to make. She nodded like she understood something in that answer he hadn't meant to reveal. On day 23, the babysitter called in sick. Marcus had to bring Isaiah to the diner for the morning shift. His son sat at the counter with a sketchbook and the cheap pencils from the drugstore, drawing quietly while Marcus worked. The woman noticed. Of course she noticed. She'd been watching everything with the intensity of someone documenting evidence. She approached the counter slowly. Isaiah looked up, no fear in his face, just curiosity. That's beautiful. May I see? Isaiah showed her. A drawing of a superhero cape flowing, one hand raised toward the sky. The proportions were wrong and the perspective was amateur, but the feeling was there, the sense of someone strong and capable and good. Is that your dad? Isaiah nodded, shy smile creeping across his face. He saves people. Does he? The woman looked at Marcus, something unreadable in her expression. Not like that. Just... Isaiah struggled for words. He helps. When people need help. He doesn't have to, but he does. The woman's face did something complicated, softened and hardened at the same time, like she was fighting something internal and losing. That's important. Helping people who need it. She reached for a napkin. Do you know how to fold paper? Isaiah shook his head. She folded the napkin carefully, hands still trembling but moving with practiced precision. When she finished, she held out a small paper crane, perfect despite the shaking, despite the cheap paper, despite everything. Isaiah took it like she'd handed him something precious. Wow, can you teach me? She nodded, sat down next to him, showed him the folds, patient and gentle, her voice losing the roughness it carried when she spoke to adults. Marcus watched from behind the counter. Watched this woman who lived on the streets, who counted pennies for coffee, teaching his son to create something beautiful from nothing. Watched Isaiah's face light up when he completed his first crane, lopsided and wrinkled, but undeniably a crane. "Why do you look so sad?" Isaiah asked it without warning, the way children asked things when they noticed something wrong in the world and wanted to understand it. The woman stopped folding mid-crease, looked at Isaiah for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick with something Marcus couldn't name. "I'm not sad right now. Not with you." Isaiah seemed satisfied with that answer, went back to folding tongue between his teeth in concentration. Later, after she'd left, after the morning rush had died and Isaiah was drawing again, his son looked up at Marcus. "I like her. The paper crane lady." Yeah. She's sad, but she tries not to be. That's brave." Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. 8 years old, and already seeing through to the truth of people, already understanding that courage sometimes looked like showing up when showing up was the hardest thing you could do. Sarah would have loved that about him, would have been proud. The woman started coming more regularly after that, 6 days a week, sometimes 7. Always the same corner, same coffee, same toast cut into small pieces. But now she talked, asked questions, about Marcus's day, about whether it was busy, about Isaiah, always about Isaiah, what he liked to draw, what he was learning in school, whether he was happy. Marcus answered carefully, shared enough to be honest, held back enough to maintain boundaries. You didn't pour your whole life out to someone you barely knew, even if that someone was starting to feel familiar. On day 37, she asked about Sarah. Isaiah's mother. What happened to her? They were alone in the back of the diner. 2:30 in the afternoon, dead zone between lunch and dinner. Marcus was restocking napkin dispensers. Cancer, breast cancer, diagnosed when Isaiah was 4. She fought it for 18 months, died 3 years ago last May. I'm sorry. Me too. He kept working, hands moving on autopilot. She was good, better than me in most ways, kinder, more patient, better at seeing the best in people. You seem pretty good at that yourself. Marcus shook his head. I see people. That's different from seeing the best in them. The woman, he still didn't know her name, had never asked, and she'd never offered, tilted her head slightly. Is it? Seems like seeing people at all is the hard part. Most folks look right through anyone who doesn't serve a purpose. Something bitter in her voice, something that spoke to experience. That happened to you? She laughed short and without humor. Every day for the last 16 months. 16 months. Marcus filed that number away. 16 months of whatever life she was living now, which meant something had happened 16 months ago to put her here. What changed? He asked it quietly, giving her room to decline. She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, I lost my parents. Car accident, bad weather, bad timing, both gone in an instant. I'm sorry. Everyone was sorry. Lined up to tell me how sorry they were. But sorry doesn't change anything, does it? Doesn't bring them back? Doesn't fill the space they left? She paused. My fiancé left 2 weeks after the funeral. Turned out what he loved was what came with me, not me. Marcus set down the napkin dispensers, gave her his full attention. So I decided to find out who I was without... She stopped, seemed to reconsider. Without everything I thought defined me. See if there was anything real underneath. And... She looked at him with those exhausted brown eyes, still looking. But I'm starting to think the answer isn't what you have. It's who sees you when you have nothing. The words landed heavy between them. Marcus thought about Sarah, who'd seen him when he was 17 and stupid and had nothing but potential that might never amount to anything. Who'd chosen him anyway. Who'd built a life with him that wasn't what they'd planned, but was still good, still real, still worth every sacrifice. For what it's worth, Marcus said. I see you. Her eyes got wet again. She blinked hard, looked away. I know. That's why I keep coming back. After that conversation, something shifted. She started asking different questions, deeper ones. about whether Marcus ever thought about starting over, about what he'd do if he had the chance to chase culinary school again to open that restaurant, about dreams deferred and whether they expired or just waited. Marcus didn't have good answers, didn't know if dreams came with expiration dates or if they could survive being shelved for years while you did the necessary work of staying alive and keeping your kid healthy. But he thought about it, lying awake at night in the apartment that was too small and too cold, listening to Isaiah breathe in the next room. Marcus thought about what it would mean to start over, to try again, to build something that mattered beyond just surviving. The woman asked about happiness, about whether he was happy doing this. The diner, the warehouse, the endless cycle of work and bills and more work. I don't know, I'm getting by. That's not the same thing. Her voice was gentle but firm. No, it's not. Marcus wiped down a table that didn't need wiping just to have something to do with his hands. But getting by is what I've got right now. Can't afford to think bigger than that. What if you could? Can't base my life on what-ifs. Why not? What-ifs are all any of us have. The future is just a series of what-ifs we either chase or ignore. Marcus looked at her, really looked, at the worn jacket and the tangled hair and the hands that still shook when she held her coffee, at the contradiction of someone who spoke like she'd had education and opportunities but lived like she'd lost everything. Who are you? The question came out before he could stop it. She smiled, sad and knowing. Someone who's learning that money can't buy the things that actually matter. That's all you need to know. On day 42, she didn't come in. Marcus made coffee anyway, cut toast into small pieces, set it at her table and waited. She didn't show. Day 43, same thing. Coffee going cold, toast going stale. The corner booth empty and wrong like a puzzle missing its central piece. Michelle noticed. Your friend skipped town. Don't know, hope not. Why do you care so much you don't even know her name? Marcus didn't have an answer for that, or didn't have one he could articulate. How did you explain that someone had become part of your routine without becoming part of your life? That her absence left a hole you couldn't justify feeling Gary was less subtle. Probably finally froze to death. Homeless don't last long once winter hits. Marcus's jaw tightened. His hand wiping down the counter stilled. Don't. The word came out flat and hard. Gary blinked, surprised. Marcus never snapped, never raised his voice, never let the customers or the co-workers get under his skin. I'm just saying, I know what you're saying. Don't say it again. Gary held up his hands, backed off, went to the other end of the diner and stayed there. Michelle approached carefully. You okay? Fine. You're not fine. You're worried about her. Marcus kept wiping, circles on the counter, same spot over and over. She's a person, Michelle. Doesn't matter if I know her name or where she sleeps or what her story is. She's a person and she's gone and I'm allowed to be worried. Michelle's face softened. Yeah, you are. Day 44. Day 45. Day 46. Marcus made the coffee, cut the toast, left it waiting, threw it away at the end of each shift when it became clear she wasn't coming. Isaiah noticed his mood. You okay, Dad? Yeah, buddy. Just tired. Is it the paper crane lady? Is she coming back? Marcus looked at his son. At those eyes that saw too much, understood too much, carried too much wisdom for 8 years on Earth. I don't know. I hope she does. She seemed lonely, like she needed friends. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about 16 months, about parents dead and fiancés who left, and testing whether kindness still existed, about someone who'd had everything and given it up to find out who she really was underneath, about the way she'd looked at him when she said, "Who sees you when you have nothing?" Mrs. Thompson knocked on his door the next morning, early before his shift started. She had Isaiah with her, already dressed for school. Couldn't sleep either. She studied his face with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. Something like that. The woman from the diner. She's important to you. It wasn't a question. Marcus didn't treat it like one. I don't know if that's the right word. What is the right word? Marcus thought about it. She reminded me that people still matter, even when they can't give you anything back. Maybe especially then. Mrs. Thompson nodded slowly. Your Sarah would have liked her, I think. Something in Marcus's chest cracked a little. Yeah, she would have. Day 47. Still empty. Still no word. Marcus walked through the neighborhood after his shift. Down streets he didn't usually take, through parks where the homeless sometimes gathered, past shelters with lines stretching around corners. He didn't find her. Didn't really expect to. Just needed to feel like he was doing something instead of waiting. Day 48. Day 49. On day 50, Marcus stopped making the coffee, stopped cutting the toast, stood at the corner booth and accepted that she was gone, and he'd probably never know why or where or if she was okay. He pulled his wedding ring off that night, first time in 3 years. Sat at the kitchen table turning it over in his fingers, watching how it caught the light, thinking about promises made and promises kept, and whether Sarah would understand what he was feeling. Not love. Couldn't be love. You didn't fall in love with someone you barely knew, whose name you'd never learned, who'd been gone for a week. But something. Connection, maybe. Recognition. The sense that she'd seen him the same way he'd seen her, clearly, honestly, without the filters people usually used. He put the ring in the drawer next to Sarah's coffee mug, the one she'd used every morning, the one he couldn't bring himself to donate or throw away or even move from its spot. I'm not forgetting you, he said to the empty kitchen. Just trying to stay soft like you told me, trying not to let grief make me hard. The apartment didn't answer. Apartments never did. Day 51. Marcus came to work and didn't look at the corner booth, didn't make extra coffee. Accepted that this chapter, brief and strange as it had been, was closed. Then, at 9:15, the door opened. 4 bodyguards in black suits, 2 lawyers in gray. The entire diner went silent. And Marcus understood in the half-second before the woman lawyer spoke that nothing had been what it seemed, that the woman who'd sat in the corner counting pennies had been something else entirely, that the test she'd mentioned, seeing who would treat her with kindness when she had nothing, had been real and deliberate, and he'd passed it without knowing there was a test to pass. The woman approached. Her voice carried across the silent diner. Excuse me, I'm looking for Marcus Johnson. Does he work here? Michelle pointed. The woman turned. Marcus met her eyes. Mr. Johnson, my name is Patricia Lewis. I'm an attorney representing the estate of Elizabeth Victoria Anderson. We need to speak with you. Elizabeth. Her name was Elizabeth, and she was dead. Everything else, the money, the foundation, the letter, all of that would come. But in that moment, standing behind the counter, with a dish rag in his hand, and every eye in the diner watching, all Marcus could think was that he'd never asked her name, never asked where she lived, or where she came from, or what had brought her to that corner booth 51 mornings in a row. He'd just made her coffee, cut her toast, treated her like she mattered, and apparently that had been enough. The lawyers left at 10:17. Marcus stood at the corner booth for 3 minutes after the door closed behind them, staring at the cold coffee cup, the envelope in his hand, the check folded in his pocket, heavy as stone. The diner had gone back to its normal sounds, dishes, clattering, conversations resuming, the espresso machine hissing, but none of it felt real. Everything had the quality of being underwater, muted and strange. Michelle touched his arm. "Dee, you should go home." He nodded, couldn't seem to move. "Go on. We'll cover. Mr. Patterson already said." Marcus untied his apron, hung it on the hook. His hands moved through the motions automatically, while his brain tried to process billionaire and heart failure and foundation, and saw me. The words wouldn't line up into anything coherent. Outside, the November air bit through his jacket. He started walking. Not toward home, not toward anywhere specific. Just walking because standing still felt impossible. His phone buzzed. "Mrs. Thompson, Isaiah's at school. I can pick him up if you need time." He texted back, "Thank you. Yes, I'll explain later." Another text, this one from a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Johnson, this is Patricia Lewis. When you're ready to discuss the foundation, call me. No rush. Take the time you need. My condolences." Condolences. Like he'd lost someone close to him. Like 51 mornings of coffee and toast had earned him the right to grieve. But maybe they had. Maybe that was exactly what Elizabeth had been testing, whether grief was reserved for people you knew well, or whether it could extend to anyone you'd seen clearly treated with dignity, recognized as human. Marcus walked for an hour, through streets he knew and streets he didn't, past buildings that had been there since before he was born, and construction sites putting up glass towers that would house people who'd never set foot in Riverside Diner. The city moved around him, indifferent to the fact that his entire world had just cracked open. He ended up at the church with the cemetery behind it. The gates were unlocked. He went through, following the winding path past headstones that dated back 200 years past, mausoleums for families whose names still hung on buildings downtown, past the newer sections where the stones were simple and the grass still grew thin. He found the oak tree, the bench beneath it, sat down in the same spot where he used to sit after Sarah died when grief was too loud to carry around other people. The envelope was still in his hand. He pulled out the letter. Read it again, slower this time, letting each word sink in. "You saved me. Not by fixing me or rescuing me, by treating me like I mattered." His eyes burned. He blinked hard, looked up at the bare branches above him, tried to breathe around the pressure building in his chest. She'd been testing him, testing everyone. 16 months of being invisible, documenting how humanity responded when she had nothing to offer in return, and he'd passed without knowing there was a test, without trying to pass, just by being exactly who Sarah had taught him to be. "The world will try to make you hard, Marcus." Sarah's voice in his memory clear, as if she were sitting beside him on this bench. "But you have to resist. You have to stay soft." He'd kept that promise, even when it hurt. Even when it would have been easier to look away, to let someone else handle it, to tell himself that other people's problems weren't his responsibility. And somehow, impossibly, that promise had led to this moment. To a dead woman's gratitude and more money than he'd see in 10 lifetimes, and a choice about what kind of person he wanted to be going forward. His phone buzzed again. Isaiah this time texted from the school office where they sometimes let kids call home during lunch. "Mrs. T says you had a big morning." "You okay, Dad?" Marcus typed back. "Yeah, buddy, I'm okay. Lot to tell you when you get home. Love you. Love you too." 3 words that steadied him, reminded him why any of this mattered. Isaiah was the center, always had been, always would be. Every choice Marcus made filtered through that single question. What's best for my son? Elizabeth's money could give Isaiah everything Marcus had never been able to provide. Medical care without the constant calculation of whether they could afford it. A good school. College without crushing debt. Stability. Security. The kind of safety net Marcus had never had. But Elizabeth hadn't left him the money just to make his own life easier. She'd left it because she trusted him to use it right. To make the world better for everyone still sitting in corners, still going invisible, still waiting for someone to see them. The foundation wasn't optional. It was the whole point. Marcus folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope, pulled out his phone and dialed Patricia Lewis. She answered immediately. "Mr. Johnson, I want to start today. The foundation. I know you said take time, but people are still out there, still waiting. Every day we delay is another day someone doesn't get seen." Silence on the line for 3 seconds. Then, "I can have preliminary paperwork ready by 2 o'clock. My office is on Boylston Street, number 412. Can you make it?" Marcus checked his watch. 11:30. "I'll be there." "Good. Bring the letter. We'll need it for the filing." He hung up, sat for another minute under the oak tree, gathering himself. Then he stood and walked back through the cemetery, past all those names and dates marking lives that had mattered to someone once, maybe still mattered to people who came here to remember. Elizabeth would have a stone somewhere. Probably already did. Probably something expensive and tasteful, the kind of memorial that matched her wealth and status. But the real memorial would be what he built in her name. That would last longer than granite. The subway took him downtown. He emerged into the financial district where buildings stretched toward gray sky, and everyone moved with purpose. Briefcases and heels clicking on sidewalk faces, locked in expressions that said time was money, and wasting either was unforgivable. Patricia Lewis's office occupied the 14th floor of a glass tower. The receptionist recognized his name, showed him to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. Patricia arrived 5 minutes later with Robert and a third person, a woman in her 50s wearing a navy suit carrying a leather portfolio. "Mr. Johnson, this is Amanda Price. She specializes in charitable foundations. I took the liberty of bringing her in." Amanda extended her hand. Her grip was firm, professional. "Patricia told me what you're planning. I want to help make it happen." They sat. Patricia spread papers across the table, incorporation documents, bylaws, mission statements, all the legal architecture that would transform Elizabeth's money into something permanent. "First question," Amanda said, pen poised over a legal pad. "What do you want this foundation to do specifically?" Marcus thought about Elizabeth's notebook, about the entries Robert had read in the diner, about 16 months of documentation proving that people treated poverty like invisibility. "I want to help people who are invisible. Homeless women, kids who can't afford medical care, anyone falling through the cracks because they don't have money or status or someone speaking up for them." Amanda wrote quickly. "Scope Boston metro area or wider. Start local. Expand if it works. Budget allocation. How much are you committing?" Marcus pulled out the check, set it on the table. Amanda's pen stopped moving. $1.2 million. All of it except what I need for Isaiah's medical expenses and getting us into better housing. Maybe $100,000 for that. The rest goes to the foundation." Patricia and Amanda exchanged glances. Robert leaned forward. "Mr. Johnson, that's extraordinarily generous, but you should think carefully. This money could secure your future, your son's education, retirement. You don't have to give it all away." "Elizabeth didn't give me this money to make my life comfortable. She gave it to me because she trusted I'd use it to help other people. That's what I'm doing." Amanda studied him with eyes that had probably seen every kind of donor, the ones who wanted buildings named after them, the ones seeking tax breaks, the ones salving guilty consciences with money they'd never miss. "You understand that running a foundation is work, real work. It's not just writing checks. It's oversight, accountability, making sure money reaches the people who need it." "I understand." "And you're willing to do that work?" "I am." She made another note. "Then let's build something that lasts." They worked for 3 hours. Marcus signed papers until his hand cramped, answered questions about governance structure, board composition, conflict of interest policies, learned vocabulary he'd never needed before, fiduciary duty, restricted funds, program-related investments. By 5:30 they had a framework. The Elizabeth Victoria Anderson Foundation would incorporate as a 501(c)(3) nonprofit. Initial board: Marcus as founder and president, Patricia as legal counsel, Amanda as financial advisor, plus 3 community seats to be filled within 60 days. Mission: providing direct support to individuals experiencing homelessness, medical hardship, or economic invisibility in Greater Boston. First disbursement should go toward immediate needs, Amanda said. Winter's coming. Shelters will be over capacity. Women and children get priority, but there's never enough space. Marcus thought about Elizabeth sleeping in shelters, standing in lines, counting coins for coffee. How much can we get to shelters in the next week? Amanda did calculations on her legal pad. If we move fast, 200,000. Emergency funding for bed expansion, medical supplies, winter clothing. Do it. Patricia made notes. We'll need to announce this properly. Media attention could help with fundraising awareness. No. The word came out harder than Marcus intended. No media. This isn't about me getting credit, it's about helping people. Respectfully, Mr. Johnson, visibility matters. If people know this foundation exists, they can access it. They can donate to it. They can, fine, announce the foundation. But my name stays out of it. Elizabeth's name is enough. Amanda nodded. We can work with that. They wrapped at 6. Marcus left with a folder full of documents, a business card for Amanda, and a check from Patricia for $90,000, the portion he'd allocated for Isaiah's medical fund and new housing. The rest, more than $1 million, now sat in a foundation account waiting to change lives. Outside, the city had transformed into evening. Streetlights reflected off wet pavement from rain that must have started while he was inside. Marcus stood on the sidewalk, briefcase in hand, and felt the weight of what he'd just done settle over him. He'd given away more money than his father had earned in 40 years of construction work. More money than Sarah's medical bills had cost even at the end when the treatments got experimental and desperate. More money than he'd make in the next 20 years of morning shifts and warehouse overtime. And it felt right. Felt like the only choice he could have lived with. The subway ride home gave him time to think about how to explain this to Isaiah. How to make an 8-year-old understand that the woman who taught him to fold paper cranes had been a billionaire testing whether kindness still existed. That she'd left them enough money to change their lives, but Marcus had given most of it away because that's what she would have wanted. Mrs. Thompson met him at the apartment door with Isaiah behind her. His son's face was tight with worry. "You've been gone all day. Mrs. T said something big happened." Marcus crouched down to eye level. "Something big did happen, buddy. Can we sit and talk about it?" They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Sarah used to help Isaiah with homework, where Marcus paid bills he could barely cover, where the three of them had eaten dinner every night until cancer made eating impossible. "Remember the paper crane lady, the one who taught you to fold napkins?" Isaiah nodded. "Her name was Elizabeth. Elizabeth Victoria Anderson. And she wasn't just a paper crane lady. She was someone very important who had a lot of money." The question landed gentle but direct, the way Isaiah asked things when he already knew the answer, but needed someone to confirm it. "She died, buddy, a few days ago. Her heart stopped working." Isaiah's face crumpled. Not full tears yet, but close. "Did it hurt?" "I don't think so. I think she was ready like Mom was ready." Isaiah processed this, bottom lip trembling. "I'm sad I didn't get to say goodbye." "Me too. Did she know that we liked her?" Marcus thought about the notebook, about day 143, and the entry describing Isaiah asking why she looked sad. "Yeah, she knew. She wrote about you in her journal, about how you asked good questions and saw people clearly." Isaiah wiped his eyes. "What happened to her money?" "She left some of it to me, to us, a lot of it actually. Enough that we don't have to worry about rent anymore. Enough for your medicine without choosing between that and groceries. Enough for you to go to college someday." "That's good." Isaiah's voice was small. "She was nice." She was, and she was also testing something. She wanted to know if people would still be kind when she didn't have money, when she looked homeless and couldn't pay for things. Isaiah frowned, thinking hard. "That's sad, that she had to test it." "Yeah, it is. But you know what she found?" "What?" "She found out that some people still care, still help, still treat each other like we matter even when we can't give anything back." Isaiah was quiet for a moment. Then, "Is that why you helped her, because she mattered?" "That's exactly why." "Good." Isaiah reached across the table, grabbed Marcus's hand. Mom would have liked that. Something in Marcus's chest broke loose. He pulled Isaiah into a hug, held him tight while his son's arms wrapped around his neck. "There's something else, buddy. Elizabeth left you a present. She wanted you to have it." He pulled out the package from the lawyers. Isaiah unwrapped it carefully, eyes going wide when he saw the professional pencils. "These are the good kind, the kind real artists use." "That's right. She wanted you to keep drawing, keep making beautiful things." Isaiah pulled out the note. "Read it slowly, lips moving over the words." When he finished, he looked up at Marcus with wet eyes. "She said love. She loved me. I think she did. I think she saw something special in you and wanted you to know it mattered." Isaiah held the pencils like they were fragile, like they might disappear if he gripped too hard. "I'm going to draw her, so I remember." "That's a good idea." Mrs. Thompson, who'd been standing quietly by the door, cleared her throat. "I should get going. Let you two have your evening." Marcus walked her out. In the hallway she stopped, turned to face him. "You gave it away, didn't you, most of the money?" "How did you—" "Baby, I've known you since you moved in here with Sarah. Knew you when you were 19 and terrified about becoming a father. Knew you through her getting sick and dying and these last 3 years raising that boy alone. You've never made the easy choice when the right choice was harder." Marcus didn't know what to say to that. Mrs. Thompson patted his cheek. "Your Sarah would be proud. That woman Elizabeth would be proud. And somewhere I hope someone who needs help is about to get it, because you chose to see them the way you saw her." She left. Marcus stood in the hallway listening to her footsteps descend the stairs, feeling the truth of what she'd said settle into his bones. Back inside, Isaiah had spread his new pencils across the table, organizing them by shade. Marcus watched him work. Watched those small hands. Sarah's hands, really delicate and artistic, arranged the tools with reverence. "Dad, can we go see her Elizabeth's grave, I mean? I don't know where it is yet, but when I find out, yeah, we'll go. Can I bring her a drawing? She'd like that, buddy. She'd like that a lot." That night, after Isaiah went to bed, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with the folder from Patricia's office, reviewed the foundation documents, the mission statement, the budget allocations. Everything looked professional and official and completely foreign to who he was, a guy who made coffee and worked warehouse shifts and had never managed anything more complicated than a household budget that never quite balanced. But Elizabeth had trusted him with this, had seen something in him that made her believe he could take her money and transform it into help for people who needed it. He couldn't let her down. His phone buzzed. Text from a number with a 617 area code. "Mr. Johnson, this is Amanda Price. I've been thinking about the Foundation's first initiative. There's a shelter on Albany Street, women and children only, capacity for 40, but they're housing 60 right now. They need beds, blankets, winter coats. I can get a list by tomorrow. Would you want to do a site visit this week?" Marcus typed back. "Yes. When Thursday morning 10 a.m., I'll be there." He set the phone down, pulled out the letter one more time, read the part that kept catching in his throat. "I'm leaving you this money because I trust you. I trust that you will use it the way it was meant to be used. Not to buy things or escape your life, but to make the world a little bit better." Trust was a weight, heavier than money, heavier than responsibility. Trust meant someone had looked at you and decided you were worth believing in, worth investing in, worth the risk of being disappointed. Sarah had trusted him, with her life, with Isaiah's future, with her last wishes and her dying promises. Elizabeth had trusted him, with her fortune, with her legacy, with the proof that her 16-month test hadn't been wasted effort. He had to earn that trust, had to make it count. Marcus opened his laptop, old slow screen cracked in one corner, but functional. Started researching. Homeless shelters in Boston. Statistics on women experiencing housing insecurity. Medical debt and its relationship to poverty. Food deserts. Transportation access. All the systems that failed people who couldn't afford to demand better. He read until 2 in the morning. Until his eyes burned and his head ached, and he'd filled 3 pages with notes about needs and gaps and places where Elizabeth's foundation could make a difference. Then he went to bed. Lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about the corner booth at Riverside Diner. About coffee going cold. About toast cut into small pieces. About 51 mornings of routine that had turned into something neither of them could have predicted. Sarah's voice in his head. "Stay soft. Don't let grief make you hard." Elizabeth's words in the letter. "You saved me by treating me like I mattered." Somewhere between those two truths was the answer to who he needed to be going forward, not just for Isaiah, not just for himself, but for everyone still sitting in corners counting pennies waiting for someone to look up and see them. He'd build the foundation, make it work, turn Elizabeth's trust into tangible help for people who needed it. Thursday morning came cold and sharp. Marcus met Amanda outside the shelter on Albany Street. The building was old brick bars on the windows, paint peeling around the doorframe. A line of women and children stretched down the sidewalk, waiting for the doors to open at 9. Amanda handed him a clipboard. Current capacity 40 beds. Current occupancy 73. They're rotating. Some women sleep in shifts, some stay in the common room. Winter will make it worse. They went inside. The director, a woman named Claire Rodriguez with tired eyes and capable hands, showed them around. Bunk beds crammed into rooms designed for half the number, a kitchen serving meals to twice its intended capacity, a small room with donated toys where children played while their mothers filled out job applications or waited for caseworkers. "We do what we can," Claire said, "but the need outpaces resources, always has." Marcus watched a little girl, maybe 5, playing with a doll missing one arm. Watched her mother sit nearby filling out forms with a pen that kept skipping, going back to trace over letters that didn't take the first time. He thought about Elizabeth, about whether she'd stayed in places like this during her 16 months, whether she'd slept in shifts or on floors or in common rooms filled with strangers breathing. "What do you need most?" he asked Claire. She didn't hesitate. "Beds, 20 more minimum. Industrial washing machines, current ones are dying, and we're washing sheets for 70 people with equipment meant for 40. Winter coat sizes women's small through plus. Boots. Medical supplies for kids with asthma, ear infections, the usual childhood stuff that gets worse when you're stressed and underhoused." Marcus made notes. Amanda was already on her phone texting someone. "What's the timeline for getting you 20 beds?" Claire laughed hollow. "In a perfect world, a week. In reality, 6 months, maybe never. We've been applying for grants, but what if you had them by Monday?" She stopped, looked at him like he'd just spoken another language. "Monday, 5 days from now. What if I could get you 20 beds, 2 industrial washers, and everything else on your immediate needs list?" Claire's eyes got wet. Her voice came out rough. "Then I'd say you're either crazy or a miracle. We don't get miracles here." Amanda held up her phone. "I have a supplier who can deliver beds by Saturday if we order today. Washers take longer, 10 days minimum, but we can get commercial-grade temporary units for the interim." "Do it," Marcus said. "That's $60,000 minimum. We have $1 million. Use what's needed." Claire sat down in the nearest chair like her legs had stopped working. "Who are you people?" "Elizabeth Victoria Anderson Foundation. We exist to help people who are invisible to most of the system." Marcus crouched down to eye level with her. "You're not invisible to us." Claire put her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook. Amanda touched Marcus's arm, gestured toward the door. They stepped out into the hallway. "You just changed that woman's life," Amanda said quietly, "and the lives of 73 women and children who sleep here. Elizabeth changed their lives. I'm just the person moving her money where it needs to go." "That's not nothing, Mr. Johnson. Most people with your resources would have committees and feasibility studies and 6-month timelines. You just committed 60 grand in 10 minutes. Because it needs to happen. Because Claire asked for help and we can give it. What's complicated about that?" Amanda smiled, small and genuine. "Nothing. That's what makes you perfect for this." They spent another hour at the shelter. Marcus met the women, learned names, heard stories. Single mothers escaping abuse, women with mental health conditions who'd lost jobs and housing, teenagers aging out of foster care with nowhere to go. Each one a person. Each one visible if you bothered to look. On the subway ride back downtown, Marcus pulled out his phone. Texted Isaiah at school. "Did something good today. Tell you about it tonight. Love you." The response came during passing period. "Proud of you, Dad? Mom would be too." 2 days after the shelter visit, Marcus got a call from Claire Rodriguez. Her voice was tight, controlled panic barely held in check. "The landlord's threatening eviction. Says we're violating occupancy codes, which we are technically, but he knew that when he rented to us. Now he's claiming the building needs urgent repairs and we have to be out in 30 days. Marcus's grip tightened on his phone. "Why now?" because he found out we're getting foundation money. Thinks he can jack the rent up 500% if he clears us out and brings in a for-profit operator. Systemic greed wearing the mask of compliance. The kind of obstacle that crushed organizations like Claire's everyday legal, technically justified, completely devoid of humanity. Don't sign anything. I'm calling Patricia. The legal battle took 2 weeks. Patricia brought in housing attorneys who specialized in nonprofit tenant rights. Amanda dug through the landlord's finances, found a pattern 3 other nonprofits pushed out the same way. Over the past 5 years, buildings flipped to luxury developers within 6 months. Each time the city's housing authority had received complaints. Each time, nothing had been done. The landlord's name was Donald Berkshire. 62 years old, owned 17 properties across Boston, all of them profitable, most of them benefiting from tax breaks meant for affordable housing. He wore expensive suits to city council meetings and donated to the right campaigns. On paper, he looked like a pillar of the community. In reality, he was a predator who'd learned to use bureaucracy as a weapon. Patricia scheduled a meeting. Marcus, Claire, and Amanda sat across a conference table from Berkshire and his lawyer, a slick young man in a gray suit who spoke in the language of liability and risk management. "My client has legitimate concerns about building safety," the lawyer said. "The occupancy violations create fire hazards. The liability exposure is untenable." "Your client knew about the occupancy count when he signed the lease 2 years ago," Patricia countered. "He accepted payment every month without complaint until he learned about foundation funding. That's not safety concern. That's opportunism." Berkshire leaned forward, smile oily and practiced. "Ms. Rodriguez runs a fine operation, but circumstances change. The building needs work that requires temporary vacancy. I'm willing to discuss relocation assistance." "You're willing to pay us to leave so you can triple the rent to someone else," Claire said. Her voice was steady, but her hands gripped the table edge. 73 women and children will end up on the street because you want more profit from a building you bought with affordable housing subsidies. "Business is business, Ms. Rodriguez, I'm sure you understand." Marcus had been quiet through the whole meeting, watching Berkshire with eyes that saw clearly. Saw the calculations behind the practiced concern. Saw the way he looked at Claire not as a person running a critical service, but as an obstacle to revenue. "How much?" Marcus asked. Everyone turned to look at him. "How much would it take for you to sell the building?" Berkshire's eyebrows rose. "The building's not for sale." "Everything's for sale. You just proved that." "So how much?" The lawyer whispered something to Berkshire. Berkshire's smile widened. $2.4 million. That's fair market value for a property this size in this location. Amanda's face went tight. Patricia started to object. Marcus held up a hand. "We don't have that. But we can raise it. Give us 90 days. 30 days. That's what the eviction notice says. 60. And you suspend the eviction proceedings during negotiation." Berkshire studied Marcus like he was trying to figure out where the angle was. Finding nothing, he nodded. 60 days, but the eviction notice stands if you can't deliver. They left the meeting with a deadline and a problem. $2.4 million was more than twice what the foundation had. Even liquidating everything wouldn't cover it. Marcus called an emergency board meeting that night. Patricia, Amanda, and the 3 community board members they'd appointed, a retired social worker, a small business owner, and a formerly homeless woman who'd rebuilt her life and now worked as a paralegal. "We can't raise that kind of money in 60 days, Amanda said. "Not without major donors, and we've deliberately kept a low profile." "Then we go public," Marcus said. "You said no media attention." "I said my name stays out of it. Elizabeth's story." "That's different." He looked around the table. "People need to know what she did, what she was testing, why this foundation exists. If we're going to ask them for money, they deserve to know why it matters." Patricia nodded slowly. "I can reach out to some journalists. The story is compelling. Billionaire goes homeless to test humanity, dies, leaves fortune to cafe worker who showed her kindness. That'll get attention." "Good. But we do it right. We talk about the women at Albany Street. We talk about Claire and what she's built. We make Berkshire's eviction threat public. Let people see what we're fighting against." The formerly homeless board member, a woman named Jessica Chen, spoke up. "And we tell them this isn't just about one shelter. It's about a pattern, about landlords who use the law to push out services that don't maximize profit. Make it about systemic change, not just one building." Marcus met her eyes. "Exactly." The story broke 3 days later. The Boston Globe ran it front page. "Billionaire's final test heiress lived homeless for 16 months, left fortune to stranger who showed kindness." By noon, it had gone viral. By evening, the foundation's website, which Patricia had quietly launched the week before, crashed from traffic. By the next morning, donations started coming in. $20 from a retired teacher, $50 from a construction worker, $100 from a nurse who'd once been homeless herself, thousands of small gifts from people who understood what it meant to be invisible. But the real impact came from something else. A woman named Rebecca Morrison called the foundation on day 4. She'd read the Globe story, recognized Donald Berkshire's name. "He did the same thing to us 3 years ago. Women's Recovery Center in Dorchester. We had 40 women in treatment. He bought the building, claimed code violations, evicted us with 30 days' notice. Half those women ended up back on the street. Some of them died." Patricia took the call, got the details, started making more calls. By the end of week 1, they'd found 6 organizations Berkshire had pushed out using the same playbook. By the end of week 2, a city councilor named Sandra Torres announced an investigation into landlords exploiting nonprofit tenants. By week 3, the donations had topped $1.8 million. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A venture capitalist named Michael Zhang read the story and called Amanda. "I knew Elizabeth Anderson. Not well, but we moved in the same circles before her parents died. She was brilliant, kind. The world broke something in her when they passed." His voice was thick with old regret. "I should have checked on her, should have noticed when she disappeared. I didn't. None of us did." "It's not too late to help," Amanda said. "I'll match whatever you've raised, dollar for dollar, and I'll find 9 other people to put in $100,000 each. We'll get you to 2.4. He was true to his word. 10 days later, the foundation had the money. Marcus called Berkshire's lawyer. "We're ready to close." The closing happened on day 53. Berkshire showed up expecting to walk away with a fortune. Instead, he walked into a conference room filled with cameras because Patricia had invited the press and Jessica Chen had invited representatives from all 6 organizations he'd displaced. "Mr. Berkshire," a reporter asked, "do you have any comment on the allegations that you've systematically exploited nonprofits for profit?" His face went red. His lawyer tried to shut it down, but the cameras were already rolling. The story ran that night, "Landlord's Pattern of Displacing Nonprofits Exposed in Shelter Sale." The city council fast-tracked new protections. The Torres Act, named for the counselor who'd championed it, created a registry of nonprofit housing mandatory notification periods before eviction and right of first refusal for organizations facing displacement. Claire called Marcus the day after the sale closed, crying so hard she could barely speak. "We own the building. The women own their home. Because of you. Because of Elizabeth. And because you refused to give up. No, money's easy. Seeing people is hard. You saw us." 3 weeks became a blur. The foundation's first disbursements went out. The shelter purchased $30,000 to a free clinic serving uninsured patients, $15,000 to a food bank covering 3 neighborhoods. Word spread. Other organizations reached out. Patricia's office fielded calls daily. Marcus kept working at Riverside Diner. Couldn't quite bring himself to quit, not yet. The morning shift had become part of who he was. Plus, he needed to stay grounded. Needed to remember what life looked like for people who counted pennies and chose between rent and medicine. Gary apologized properly 1 week after the lawyer's visit. Showed up early for his shift, found Marcus restocking coffee filters. "I was wrong about her, about what I said." Marcus kept working. "Yeah, you were. I'm sorry." Apology accepted. "But you should think about why you said it in the first place. She didn't become more human when you found out she was rich. She was always human. You just couldn't see it. Gary nodded, walked away, started volunteering at the Albany Street shelter the following week, showing up Tuesday evenings to help serve dinner. Didn't make announcements about it. Just did it quietly, like he was trying to make up for something. Michelle helped too. Organized monthly fundraisers at the diner first Saturday of every month, 10% of proceeds to the foundation. Mr. Patterson matched it dollar for dollar, but the real work happened away from cameras and recognition. Marcus visited shelters weekly, met with caseworkers, learned about the invisible infrastructure that kept poor people poor, lack of ID preventing job applications, no addresses, preventing bank accounts, no transportation, preventing interviews, no childcare, preventing work. The foundation started addressing gaps, paid for ID replacements, provided temporary addresses for mail, funded daycare slots, bought monthly subway passes in bulk. Small things. Things that seemed minor until you realized how much they mattered to someone trying to claw their way back to stability. December came. Patricia called one afternoon with news. I found Elizabeth's grave location, Forest Hills Cemetery, family plot near the old chapel. Marcus's throat tightened. Can you send me the details? Already did. Marcus, she'd be proud of what you've built. Saturday morning, cold and clear. Marcus and Isaiah took the subway out to Forest Hills. The cemetery spread across 200 acres, hills and valleys, and winding paths between monuments that ranged from simple stones to elaborate mausoleums. They found the plot. Elizabeth Victoria Anderson dates carved in granite, a simple inscription, "Beloved Daughter." She saw the world truly. Isaiah knelt down, pulled out a drawing from his backpack, the one he'd been working on for weeks. 3 figures, refined now, more detailed. Marcus and Isaiah and Elizabeth sitting together at the corner booth. Elizabeth was smiling. In her hands a paper crane. He placed it at the base of the stone, weighted down with a smooth rock so the wind wouldn't take it. I drew you, Isaiah said quietly, like he was talking directly to her. So you'd know we remember. Marcus crouched next to his son, put a hand on the cold granite. We started the foundation. It's helping people. Women like you were when you had nothing. Kids who need medicine. Families falling through cracks. His voice caught. I hope we're doing it right. I hope it's what you wanted. The cemetery was quiet, except for wind and bare branches. No answer came. Headstones never answered. But Marcus felt something settle in his chest, a sense that this was right. That standing here with his son, honoring a woman who'd tested humanity and found it wanting in almost everyone, this was exactly what Elizabeth would have wanted. Isaiah folded more paper cranes from napkins he'd brought, placing them around the grave. Marcus told Elizabeth about the shelter beds, the washing machines, the clinic funding the Torah's Act, the building purchase, all the ways her money was changing lives and changing systems. When they finally left, walking back through the cemetery toward the entrance, Isaiah looked up at him. Dad, do you think she's happy wherever she is? Marcus thought about the question, about Sarah's last words. Be happy, Marcus. Not right away, but someday, and whether Elizabeth had found peace in her final moments. Yeah, buddy. I think she found what she was looking for, proof that kindness still exists, that people still matter to each other. Because of you. Because of a lot of people. I just happened to be the one she met. Isaiah considered this. I'm glad it was you, though. I'm glad she met someone good. They rode the subway home in comfortable silence. Isaiah held his new pencils like sacred objects. Marcus held the memory of Elizabeth's grave, the drawing placed there, the promise made. He'd keep seeing people, every day, for as long as it mattered, which meant forever. 5 years later. Marcus stood in the lobby of the Elizabeth Victoria Anderson Center, 3 floors of renovated warehouse space in Roxbury, 2 blocks from Riverside Diner. The building that used to house luxury condos until the foundation bought it, converted it into something that actually served the neighborhood. 43 years old now. Gray threading through his hair at the temples, the same stress silver Elizabeth had worn. Isaiah was 13, taller than Marcus's shoulder, still drawing with those pencils, now supplemented by an art school scholarship the foundation funded. The lobby walls were covered with photographs. Women who'd come through the Albany Street shelter, now in stable housing. Kids who'd received medical care, now healthy and thriving. Families who'd been invisible, now seen. In the center behind glass, Elizabeth's notebook. Open to day 143, the entry about Isaiah asking why she looked sad. Michelle worked here now. Left the diner 2 years ago to run the foundation's volunteer coordination program. Gary volunteered 3 nights a week, still making up for what he'd said, still learning how to see people. Mrs. Thompson had passed away last spring at 77. Her funeral filled a church. The foundation established a scholarship in her name, the Margaret Thompson Award for Community Care, given annually to someone who saw people when no one else did. The numbers told part of the story: 1,247 women, housed 2,891 children's medical bills, paid 47 shelters funded across Massachusetts, 3 pieces of legislation passed, strengthening housing protections, 6 buildings purchased, preserved as affordable nonprofit space. But numbers weren't the real story. The real story was Claire Rodriguez, now the foundation's chief operating officer, who'd gone from running a shelter on hope and rage to managing a $15 million annual budget. The real story was Patricia Lewis, who'd taken the foundation's model and replicated it in 4 other states, Elizabeth's legacy spreading like ripples. The real story was standing in front of Marcus right now, a woman in her 20s, clean clothes, steady eyes, holding a manila folder. "Mr. Johnson, I'm Sarah Chen. I stayed at the Albany Street shelter 3 years ago with my daughter. You paid for her asthma medication." Marcus's throat tightened. "I remember. I start nursing school next week. Full scholarship. I wanted to thank you in person before—" Her voice broke. "You saved our lives." "Elizabeth saved your lives. I just moved her money where it needed to go." Sarah shook her head. "No, money's easy. Seeing people is hard. You saw us." After she left, Marcus walked to his office on the 3rd floor. The window looked out over Roxbury, over neighborhoods where people still struggled, still went invisible, still waited for someone to notice. On his desk, 2 framed items. Sarah's coffee mug, the one he'd never been able to use after she died. Now it held Penn's pencils, a daily reminder of the woman who'd taught him to stay soft, and Elizabeth's letter. The words he'd read so many times he could recite them by memory. You will never know how much that meant. But he did know. He knew because he saw it every day in the faces of people who'd been invisible and were now seen, in the families who'd been falling and were now caught, in the systems that were slowly, painfully starting to bend toward actually helping people. His phone buzzed. Isaiah texting from school. "Still on for cemetery visit Saturday. Want to bring new drawing?" Marcus typed back. "Absolutely. She'd love that." Every year on the anniversary of that first morning, October 3rd, Marcus and Isaiah visited Elizabeth's grave, brought coffee in a thermos, toast cut into small pieces, told her about the foundation's work, the lives changed, the systems reformed. This year would be different. This year they had something new to share: the center's opening, the expansion to western Massachusetts, the legislative victory protecting 10,000 shelter beds from predatory landlords, the replication of the model in New York and Philadelphia and Seattle. Marcus looked out the window at the city that had tested Elizabeth and found humanity wanting in almost everyone. Almost. One person had been enough. One morning of coffee and kindness had been enough to prove that people could still see each other, still care, still choose compassion when compassion served no personal gain. Elizabeth had left him money, but what she'd really left was a question: what will you do when someone needs you and there's nothing in it for you? Marcus had answered that question 51 mornings in a row without knowing he was being tested, and now 5 years later he was still answering it. Would keep answering it until the day he couldn't anymore. Because people mattered. Because kindness wasn't transactional. Because somewhere right now someone was sitting in a corner going invisible, waiting to see if humanity had anything left worth believing in. And the answer needed to be yes. It always needed to be yes. Marcus picked up his phone, called the director of a shelter in Springfield that had reached out last week desperate for winter funding. "This is Marcus Johnson from the Elizabeth Victoria Anderson Foundation. Let's talk about how we can help." The work continued. The seeing continued. The answer was yes. It would always be yes.